What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is still having a great weekend as it's coming to an end and we have to get back to adulting tomorrow with it being Monday. But until then, we can sit back, enjoy some movies, some TV series. And for today's horror movie review, horror movie, fantasy, action, it's a bit of a mix, but still horror movie nonetheless. And it is called A Night's War. Now, this one may sound a bit familiar. We did do a trailer review reaction to this film back on January 24th. And when we did the trailer review at that point, it was still a few weeks out. Actually, I think it was like 2 weeks out, two and a half weeks until this film was going to drop. I do believe it did release. I'm not sure if it did release in select theaters. I should maybe rephrase that. I do know it did hit digital, I believe, on February 11th. So I purchased it that week, later on that week, around the 15th or so, and finally got to watch it end to end last night. And so we're going to go through a semi-spoiler review. I don't want to get too deep into spoilers just because, again, it hasn't been out that long as far as available for those to rent it or purchase it and watch it. But we will cover off on some spoilers. So just be aware. But I will again remind everyone once we get to that point, I'll say again, we're going into spoilers. But until then, we'll just give some high-level information on this one, and hopefully I'll be able to pronounce their names correctly. So as you see here, again, this is A Night's War. It is deemed a action fantasy horror. And just, looking at this, when I think about the trailer itself, it did remind me a little bit of those types of fantasy action films that we got in the 80s around, like Conan the Barbarian, Excalibur, those types of things. Now, it reminded me of that because of the time period it's in. It's being based in like almost this medieval time period, which, if you know me and you've seen me talk about this topic or medieval films on other channels, I absolutely love those types of films. I love that time period. So when I saw this film first come up and the trailer, I was already all in. I was all in just for that perspective, and then the fact that it was also a horror film, it checked off that box for me as well. So I knew once this film came out for digital, I was going to be getting it and watching it. So the director's name for this is Matthew Ninaber. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He's also the writer, and he does star in it as well, along with Jeremy Ninaber and Kristen, Kaster. So those are the primary, I'll say, actors and an actress for this film. Primarily, though, being Jeremy and Kristen. They're the two focal points of the story. As you see here, the two focal points on the poster or screen image here. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other various actors and actresses throughout this film. There absolutely are, but the story really focuses on these two for the most part. Now, we're not going to cover, I can cover off briefly on the synopsis, but I'm not going to, because I think we're going to cover a little bit about that in the spoilers, so no need to talk about that. As I mentioned, this did release in the US at least on February 11th on digital, so that's how I got it. And it does go a little bit longer than your typical horror film. Again, this isn't just a horror film. It does run for an hour and 43 minutes. Typically, we see horror films around that 90-minute mark, maybe between 80 and 90 minutes. So it's a little bit longer. But I don't think that it hurts it in any way. I don't think it being an hour and 43 minutes hurts it by any means. I think the amount of time for this film was much needed, and I think in some areas they possibly could have gone a little bit more. They probably could have pushed it to maybe that hour 55, maybe even 2 hours, but I see why they didn't, because you don't necessarily want to put stuff in a film just to put it in, right? You want it to make sense. So that's just some of the brief general information for this film. Now we're going from this point forward to get into spoilers, so I'm going to pull up my notes here. Again, I am going to kind of start from the beginning of where this story begins, or this film begins, and then kind of move forward. But I don't want to give too much away in case some of you still had planned on going and watching this, renting it, or purchasing it. So there will be some things I'll stop and say, yep, I'm not going to mention how that happens, or I won't mention how they get out of a situation, right? So, okay. Now, as I mentioned, we're following two characters here. As I mentioned, so their names, as you see here on this, again, the image on the screen is Bodhi. He's the first image here of the night, and then we have her name is Avalon in the film. So we're really focusing on those two characters, but the overarching story is about Avalon. So there's this, as the film begins, we see a mother, wife, and her as a child cuffed together around this pole, and they're about to be set on fire by her husband and the father. Ultimately, he makes the decision to do so, and then there's this prophecy that, about her, right? So again, I don't want to get into. I don't want to explain exactly what the prophecy is and how and what she's important to stop from happening or help Bodhi and his brother. So I don't want to give that away, but just she's a very pivotal point as far as the overarching story. So she's the primary focal point that Bodhi and William are trying to save as the film goes on. So we get to a point where the two brothers are in this castle-like building, and they see her. She's about to be sacrificed by these demons, by these worshippers, and they eventually do, I don't want to say kill her outright, but if you're looking at it from the perspective of like the real world, she would have been killed, and she's pulled down by this demon into this, I want to say it looks to be blood, but it could be water, but it looks to be blood, into this like bath of blood, and taken through like a portal into another dimension. Once that happens, obviously the two brothers see this from happening, and they're fighting off, and they're trying to keep these demons out of this room. So they're fighting that battle as well, but at the same time trying to save her. They can't save her, so they both look at each other, and William, without warning Bodhi, makes a decision. He asks him, how committed are you? Are you willing to give your life for this? Are you willing to give your life for the promises you made? And he says absolutely. And without warning, and it surprised me, William pulls out his dagger, stabs his brother. And I think his brother was probably just as surprised as I was. At first I didn't see it coming, but then I thought to myself, man, that was kind of a dick move. But I understand though the perspective that the character was taking, that hey, we gotta make a sacrifice here. It's gotta be you, and you gotta go get her. Does that, so then he also then gets pulled down to this portal. William, knowing that he was going to get pulled down into this portal, into this other dimension to go find her and save her. That happens, so he goes down there, and it seems now at this point, time stands still for William in the real world, so to speak. So now we're transported into this other dimension where the rest of the film now starts to take place. Again, now for William, the reason why I say it stands still is because we eventually see William again, and time hasn't moved. Time is still as we left it. So that's why I'm saying time seems like it freezes up there. So now we're in this other worldly dimension. Bodhi comes across this gatekeeper who promises him 100 lives, more or less, is how he says it. And in order to fulfill or to gain this promise, as he navigates this dimension to find Avalon, this gatekeeper knows that you're going to need all these extra lives. Pretty much, you're going to need to be coming back to life because you're not going to survive this. Bodhi's not really believing him, but does believe him and realizes, I might need this. So he has this talisman, like this necklace that has like this glow inside of it, and he tells him, if you make this deal, you gotta take me back through, like the portal, so to speak, back to the real world. That's the deal. And they have to seal this in blood. Bodhi decides, you know what? Okay, let's do it, and makes the deal. Now the key though with this talisman is, again, it's a necklace. He has to wear it. If he doesn't wear it, something happens to him. I'm not going to say what happens to him. I'll save that as a spoiler-free aspect. You'll have to check out the film to see how that impacts the character and how that impacts the story. It does have an impact. So He makes the deal. He eventually comes across Avalon, and Avalon seems to, even though she had just been pulled down into the portal, again, because time freezes up top. Now, one thing the film doesn't do, it doesn't tell you how much time between when Avalon fell in through this portal and before Bodhi went in, how much time had passed. Because when she goes down in there and they meet up, it seems like she's been down there a while and trying to proceed and trying to get out of this realm. So in order to do so, in order to get out, they have to get through these 3 stages, so to speak, like these 3, I don't call them tasks, but like levels of warriors, so to speak, right? So the first one is they face off against these 2 witches, which I'll say of the 3 that they have to face, the witches are by far my favorite. I loved everything about how they looked, their costumes, just how those 2 actresses absolutely killed it, in my opinion, and their makeup was phenomenal. Everything about the whole sequence of them facing these witches, and they eventually do get past them. I won't say how they get past them. I won't say the steps they had to take in order to learn how to do it. But regardless, the witches were my favorite part. I think one of my favorite parts of the whole film were the witches. So kudos to the 2 actresses that played those parts, because they killed it out. They absolutely killed it. So we move on again. So they eventually get past the witches. They have to get down to the next one. And again, now Bodhi is having these dreams while he's in this realm. Again, because of the impact that he had when he took off the talisman. Again, it does have an impact on him. Other things are happening to him. I'm not going to mention what they are. You'll have to watch the film. So they eventually get to the next battle, so to speak, which is against a much larger knight. Now this takes place in a totally different location than when they were facing the witches. The witches, they were facing off in this castle, very kind of run down. It looked very much like a rundown castle, as you would expect one would look, as like abandoned. So now they move to a complete other aspect, like they're in the mountains on like this frozen lake or river. And I don't know if this was filmed on location or not, but it looks like it could have been filmed on location. They look absolutely miserable as far as being cold. But it very well could have just been CGI practical effects, but to me it looked pretty real, and they looked pretty cold. So they have this battle here. I won't say how it turns out. Obviously you would expect it turns out in their favor, but I won't mention how this plays out. So that as they move on through the story to get to the 3rd one, now here we're going to stop the review pretty much here, because if I give away the 3rd part of this film, or the last 1/3 of the film, I think it would just ruin the experience, and I don't think you would really necessarily have a need to, not necessarily a need, but I think it would just spoil the whole thing if you started watching the film and say, oh, well, I already know who this person is or that person is. I already know how this is going to turn out for this particular character. The last part, I think, is pivotal, and I think the last couple of individuals they fight are going to be huge spoilers. So I'm not going to cover off on that. All that to say is, I will mention that Bodhi does see William again. Now, on what level? Not going to say that again, but we do see William briefly again. But that's towards the end of the film. So again, I'm going to stop there. Now, as far as my score on this, I give this a solid. For me, again, this is my perspective. I've said this before, films are very subjective. But for me, this is a solid 4. I could possibly make an argument for a 4.5, and the reason why I'm going this hard on the scoring, as far as a 4, maybe even a 4.5 for me, is because again, I love the subject matter. I love the knights aspect. I love the medieval aspect. The fact that we wrap in fantasy and horror and demons and things of that nature. I love that as well. The other thing I will spoil this though. I will spoil the fact that Bodhi and Avalon, it's not what you're thinking as far as they meet up, they travel together, and all of a sudden they fall in love, and this big romantic love story. No, not how that plays out at all. And I'm kind of glad that it didn't play out that way, because many films that you see like this kind of force that down on you. Like, oh, I know how this is going to turn out. They're going to meet. He's going to save her. They're going to fall in love, and That's, you know, the same spiel we see all the time in films like this. That doesn't happen, so I was happy that didn't happen. But the makeup across the board was great. But again, the witches though, you see one of the witches here on the screen. That's one of the witches up top in the background. Absolutely phenomenal. I thought that was great. The acting I thought was great as well. Again, for the subject matter for this film. And I will preface before we close this up, as you've heard me say in other reviews, especially when it comes to movie reviews, watch this in a silo. Don't go comparing this to another fantasy film that you've seen before, other fantasy TV series. Don't try to compare this to other horror films that deal with demons and things and witches and things of that nature. Watch this in a silo, watch it for what it is and the story it's trying to tell. I think if you do that, you're going to enjoy this film far more than you may or far more than you think that you will. So do that. Highly recommend this film. I'm not sure if it's available on Amazon for purchase or rent. I can check real quick and see if it is. But I purchased it on Apple through my Apple TV just because I knew I was going to want to have a digital copy of it. So yes, you can purchase this on. Actually, yes, you can rent it on Amazon. It is available for rent or purchase on Amazon through digital, but it looks like you can also buy a physical copy. The Blu-ray comes out on April 15th, so just under 2 months. So you can buy it there as well. It doesn't say, at least on the picture for the Blu-ray purchase, it does not say if it comes with a digital copy. So if you are into the digital copies as well, it doesn't say. But I am glad to see that we are getting a physical copy of this. I will be purchasing that as well. I don't mind on films like this double dipping. I'm happy to do so, especially when it comes to independent films like this, right? Where you have, you know, these two brothers writing, directing, starring in it, and you know, and especially when it comes to a film I enjoy, I have no problem doing a double dip purchase on it. So happy to do that. So that's our review for A Knight's War. Again, I wanted to keep it high level and I did not want to spoil it too much because, again, if we spoil it too much, it's going to ruin the film experience and watching experience. But also, it just came out not even 2.5 weeks ago, so I feel it's still fairly new for those who might still want to see it fully. So for an easy 4, maybe even a 4.5 for me. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think. If you've seen it, what did you rank it? What did you score it? If you haven't seen it, let us know. Do you plan on seeing it? And also make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We are, I think, within like 10 subscribers of hitting 500, so every little bit helps. And we will see you at the next one. Peace.